The air in my own office, usually fragrant with artisanal bread and ambition, suddenly turned cold. They handed me a severance check, my Visionary of the Year plaque from the Chef's Guild still gleaming on the wall behind them. I'm Olivia, the one who poured my grandmother's legacy and my own soul into every brick and every recipe of the Hearthstone Collective. I believed that integrity and dedication were the strongest foundations. That morning, I learned some people are happy to build their empires on someone else's ground, even if it means burying the original architect. But they overlooked one crucial clause in the lease, one quiet promise ID made to my grandmother. And that oversight was about to cost them everything. It was a Tuesday, I remember, one of those crisp autumn mornings where the city air feels alive. But inside the Hearthstone Collective, inside my office, the air was thick, almost unbreathable. Julian Vance sat across from my reclaimed oak desk, the one I'd found at a flea market and restored myself. He had that polished, imperturbable look he always wore, like a high-end suit, perfectly tailored to conceal whatever lay beneath. His wife Eleanor stood slightly behind him, a silent, elegant shadow, her gaze cool and appraising. And next to her my cousin Chloe Sterling. Chloe, who hadn't quite managed to hide the small, triumphant smirk playing at the corners of her lips. Julian cleared his throat, a sound that seemed to suck all remaining warmth from the room. "Olivia," he began, his voice smooth, almost regretful if you didn't know him better. "We've been looking at the strategic direction of the Hearthstone, and we've decided it's time for a refresh. A new energy." He gestured vaguely towards Chloe. "Chloe has some very exciting ideas, a more contemporary vision. A refresh. That's what he called it. My life's work, the legacy of my grandmother, Evelyn, reduced to something needing a refresh, like a tired hotel lobby. I thought of all the years, the endless hours I'd poured into this place. The Hearthstone wasn't just a collection of restaurants and a culinary incubator. It was a living, breathing testament to quality, to passion, to the idea that food could be more than just sustenance. It could be art, it could be community. I'd built it from the ground up, on the very land Evelyn had so shrewdly acquired decades ago. A forgotten plot that she'd seen potential in when no one else did. Her dream, her legacy, entrusted to me. And now these people, one of whom shared my blood, were telling me I was outdated. The severance check lay on the desk between us, a stark white rectangle against the warm wood. Felt like an insult. Julian continued, something about new leadership, about Chloe's dynamic approach, being what the Hearthstone needed to thrive in the modern market. I barely heard him. My gaze drifted to the wall behind him, to the Visionary of the Year plaque. It seemed to mock me now. I picked up a small, worn, leather-bound notebook from my desk. It was one of Evelyn's, filled with her spidery handwriting, recipes, thoughts, dreams for this place. I also took a small, framed photo of her and me, taken on the day we broke ground for the first renovation. Her smile in that photo, so full of pride and hope, it was a physical ache in my chest. Chloe finally spoke, her voice dripping with a cloying, false sympathy. "Oh, Olivia, I'm so sorry it had to be this way. But, sometimes change is good. We'll take good care of your little project." My little project. I managed a small, polite nod. Inside, a cold, hard resolve was beginning to solidify. I looked directly at Julian. "Thank you for your time, Julian," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Perhaps you might want to have your legal team take a closer look at Clause 9 of the lease agreement. Just a thought." I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, annoyance? Or was it a momentary unease? Eleanor's perfectly sculpted eyebrow rose a fraction. Chloe just looked confused. I didn't elaborate. I simply gathered my few belongings, the notebook, the photo, and walked out of the office I had built, leaving them with that small, planted seed of doubt. The air outside, though still crisp, suddenly felt a little easier to breathe. The first step had been taken. My grandmother, Evelyn Hayes, was a force of nature. She wasn't a chef, not in the professional sense, but she understood food, understood hospitality, and more than anything, she understood value. Not just monetary value, but the intrinsic worth of things, of land, of legacy, of integrity. She'd grown up during harder times, seen fortunes made and lost, and it had taught her a certain kind of wisdom, the kind that looks beyond the surface glitter. Years ago, she'd bought this piece of property. It was in a part of the city that was, let's say, unloved at the time, run down, a bit forgotten. But Evelyn saw something. She saw the bones of the old warehouses, the proximity to the developing waterfront, the potential for growth. She always used to say, "Olivia, darling, people are always chasing the next shiny thing, the new trend. But the real power, the lasting power, isn't in what's flashy. It's in owning the ground beneath it, the foundation." When she passed, she left me the property and a modest inheritance. Many people, I'm sure, would have sold it, taken the quick profit and moved on. But I couldn't. Evelyn's vision for this place, a haven for culinary arts, a place that nurtured talent and celebrated genuine craftsmanship, it had become my vision too. So I founded Hearthstone Holdings LLC, named in honor of her dream, and I poured every ounce of my energy, and every penny of that inheritance, into making it a reality. It wasn't easy. I was young then, barely out of college. I learned about zoning laws, building codes, liquor licenses. I spent nights hunched over architectural plans, days meeting with contractors, artisans, chefs. I wanted every detail to reflect Evelyn's spirit, quality, authenticity, a respect for tradition paired with a fearless embrace of innovation. And slowly, brick by brick, recipe by recipe, the Hearthstone Collective came to life. It became more than I'd even hoped. A place people loved, a place that critics raved about, a place that truly felt like home. Then came Julian Vance and the Vance Hospitality Group. They were a big player, expanding rapidly, acquiring boutique brands. They made an offer to lease and operate the Hearthstone. Honestly, I was hesitant at first. This was my baby, Evelyn's legacy. But they talked a good game, resources, reach, a promise to uphold the standards I'd set. And I, perhaps naively, thought I could still guide it, ensure its soul remained intact. I agreed on the condition that I'd retain a significant advisory role, a strategic oversight. That's when I called Marcus Thorne. Marcus was, well, he was more than just a lawyer. He'd been Evelyn's trusted counsel for years, a man of quiet integrity and sharp intellect. Evelyn had always said, "If you need someone to see around corners, Olivia, you talk to Marcus." So we sat down, Marcus and I, and we drafted that lease agreement. Page after page of legalese. But tucked away in Clause 9, Section B, was a little piece of Evelyn's foresight, translated into contractual language by Marcus's keen mind. It spoke of ethical governance and maintaining brand integrity. At the time, it seemed like standard boilerplate, something to ensure they didn't turn the Hearthstone into a fast food joint. I never imagined just how crucial those carefully chosen words would become. But Evelyn always said, "Plant your seeds carefully, Olivia. You never know when you'll need the shade of a strong tree." She was right. As always, the first year or so after Vance Hospitality Group took over the operational reins of the Hearthstone Collective, things hummed along. Or at least, that's how it appeared on the surface. Julian was, if nothing else, a consummate professional when it came to appearances. The restaurants remained busy. The press was still generally positive. I kept my advisory role, attending strategy meetings, offering input on menu development, on the nurturing of the young chefs in our incubator program. I tried to be the quiet guardian of Evelyn's flame. But then the cracks started to appear. Small at first, almost unnoticeable, like a tiny fissure in a beautiful porcelain vase. And the first significant crack had a name: Chloe Sterling. My cousin, Eleanor Vance, it turned out, had a soft spot for Chloe. Or perhaps she saw in Chloe a malleable tool. Chloe, who had always flitted from one passion project to another, never quite finishing anything, suddenly developed a keen interest in the hospitality industry. And Eleanor, with her social connections and her influence over Julian, began to integrate Chloe into the Hearthstone. It started with a vague marketing liaison role. Then, somehow, she was involved in guest experience enhancement. Before I knew it, Chloe was being touted as a fresh new voice in our operations, despite having virtually zero practical experience in running a high-end culinary establishment. Her ideas were often superficial, driven by trends rather than substance, sometimes directly contradicting the core ethos of the Hearthstone. She'd suggest cutting corners on ingredient quality to improve margins, or replacing our carefully curated local supplier network with cheaper, mass-market alternatives. I voiced my concerns, of course, politely at first, then more directly. In meetings, I'd present data, customer feedback, the quiet warnings from our seasoned chefs who saw the standards slipping. Julian would listen with that patient, patronizing smile of his. "Olivia, darling, we appreciate your historical perspective. But the market is evolving. Chloe brings a youthful energy, a new way of thinking." Eleanor would chime in, smooth as silk. "We must give young talent a chance to shine, Olivia. Don't be so resistant to change." Resistant to change? I had built the Hearthstone on innovation, on pushing boundaries. What I was resistant to was mediocrity. I was resistant to watching Evelyn's legacy be diluted, cheapened, by incompetence and nepotism. The whispers started among the staff. The good ones, the ones who cared, they saw it too. Complaints about Chloe's abrasive management style, her unrealistic demands, her blatant disregard for established protocols. They would reach my ears, but when I tried to escalate them through official channels, they'd get lost. Buried. HR, now firmly under Vance's control, became a black hole for such concerns. It was then I realized I couldn't fight this openly, not within their system. So I started to do what Evelyn had always taught me. Observe, listen, and gather. Quietly. Methodically. I kept copies of emails where Julian praised Chloe's innovative cost-saving measures that I knew were damaging our reputation. I made notes of conversations, documented instances where Chloe's decisions led to service failures or staff demoralization. I saved screenshots of internal memos, of glowing performance reviews for Chloe that seemed disconnected from reality. The little porcelain vase wasn't just cracked anymore. It was starting to splinter. And I was carefully collecting every single shard. The pain of seeing what they were doing to the Hearthstone was immense. But beneath the pain, a different kind of fire was being kindled. A quiet, slow-burning determination. They thought I was just a sentimental relic, clinging to the past. They had no idea I was building a case piece by painstaking piece. The day they let me go, after I walked out of that office with Evelyn's notebook and her picture tucked safely in my bag, I didn't go straight home. There's this little cafe, a few blocks from the Hearthstone, an old place with worn wooden floors and the constant, comforting hum of an espresso machine. Evelyn and I used to go there. We'd sit by the window, sketching out ideas for the Hearthstone on napkins, dreaming. Felt right to be there. I ordered a black coffee, strong just the way Evelyn liked it. And I opened my laptop. For months, no, for years really, ever since the cracks began to show, Marcus Thorne and I had been preparing. Not for this exactly. I hadn't anticipated being fired so unceremoniously. But we'd prepared for the possibility that things might one day come to a head, that the integrity of Hearthstone Holdings, of Evelyn's legacy, might need defending. On the screen was a meticulously organized folder. Subfolders within subfolders. Emails, scanned documents, audio snippets from meetings I'd learned to record discreetly on my phone, HR complaints that had been mysteriously misfiled, financial reports showing the subtle but steady decline in key quality metrics since Chloe's ascent. Each item was a small, sharp piece of the truth. I remembered a conversation with Marcus, Not long after we'd finalized the lease with Vance Hospitality, we were reviewing Clause 9, Section B. That bit about ethical governance and maintaining brand integrity. Marcus had looked at me over the rim of his glasses, his expression serious. "Olivia," he'd said, his voice quiet but firm, "this clause, it's more than just standard language in this context. Given what Hearthstone represents, given your grandmother's intent, this is a silver bullet. You only use it when absolutely necessary, and you make damn sure it's for the right reasons. For justice, not just for winning. Justice." The word echoed in my mind. Was this justice? To reclaim what was mine, what was Evelyn's, from people who were actively diminishing it, betraying the trust that had been placed in them? Yes, I believed it was. I took a slow sip of coffee. The bitterness was grounding. My hands were steady as I typed out a short, encrypted email to Marcus. Just 3 words. Proceed as planned. Dawn. I hit send. There was no elation, no surge of triumph. Just a profound, almost unnerving calm. It wasn't the calm of indifference. It was the calm of a ship that has weathered a storm and finally sees the clear, steady light of a lighthouse in the distance. I knew the course. I knew the destination. All that was left was to navigate the remaining waters. I sat there for a long time watching the city move outside the cafe window, the people hurrying by oblivious. The countdown had begun, and it was happening in the quietest way imaginable, the way Evelyn would have approved of. Strategic, patient, inevitable. Dawn. The sky was just beginning to lighten, that soft, pearly gray that comes before the sun fully asserts itself. I was there across the street from the Hearthstone Collective, parked in a discreet spot where I could see the main entrance clearly. I'd been there for a while, a thermos of hot tea beside me, the steam fogging the window slightly. It wasn't about gloating or any kind of cheap satisfaction. It was about witnessing, bearing witness to the consequences of choices made. The first few employees started to arrive around 7:30. The early kitchen crew, the morning pastry chefs. I saw the confusion on their faces as they approached the grand oak doors, the ones I'd had custom-made by a local artisan, only to find them locked. A uniformed security guard, not one of Vance's usual team but someone I recognized from the firm Hearthstone Holdings had quietly contracted, stood impassively by the entrance. He was handing out small printed notices. I could imagine the wording. By order of Hearthstone Holdings LLC, this building is temporarily inaccessible. Further information will be provided. Murmurs. Phone calls. Small groups huddling together, bewildered. Then around 8:45, Julian Vance's sleek black sedan pulled up. He emerged, looking every bit the powerful CEO, phone already pressed to his ear, no doubt barking orders. Eleanor was with him, her expression a mask of controlled annoyance. And trailing behind them, Chloe. She actually looked excited, like this was some kind of unexpected drama she was eager to be the star of. How little she knew. They strode towards the entrance, a sense of entitlement in every step. I watched as Julian tried his key card. Nothing. He tried again, a look of irritation flashing across his face. He barked at the security guard, who simply shook his head and gestured to the notice. I saw Julian snatch it, his face darkening as he read. Eleanor leaned in, her perfectly made-up face contorting into a frown. Chloe, for the first time, looked uncertain. The triumphant smirk was gone. Precisely at 9 a.m., 2 things happened simultaneously. My phone buzzed with a confirmation from Marcus. The official lease termination notice, citing Clause 9, Section B, gross mismanagement, nepotistic practices detrimental to brand integrity, and unethical dismissal of key personnel, had been delivered electronically to every senior executive at Vance Hospitality Group. At the same moment, another alert. The press release from Hearthstone Holdings LLC was live, distributed to every major news outlet and culinary publication in the city. It detailed, in calm, factual language, the reasons for the immediate termination of the lease. Then Marcus Thorne himself arrived, dignified, composed, carrying a leather briefcase. He approached Julian, who was now red-faced and shouting into his phone, and handed him a thick envelope. The hard copy. The final nail. The scene, it was quite something. Employees milling about, confused and worried. Julian, sputtering with rage, waving the papers in his hand. Eleanor, for once, looking genuinely shaken, her composure cracking. And Chloe looked like a frightened child, suddenly realizing the game was over and she'd lost. I didn't feel a surge of triumph, not really. It was more, a quiet sense of alignment, like a dislocated joint finally snapping back into place. There was a rightness to it, a restoration of balance. Evelyn's foundation, the ground she had so wisely secured, was proving its strength. I took another sip of tea. The sun was beginning to climb, casting long shadows down the street. A new day was dawning in more ways than one. The moment felt suspended. Julian's angry shouts were a harsh tear in the fabric of the morning quiet. Eleanor stood frozen, her usual social grace replaced by a kind of rigid shock. Chloe just looked small, lost. The crowd of employees had grown, their murmurs a low, anxious hum. It was time. I got out of my car, my briefcase in hand. I walked across the street, my footsteps steady on the pavement. As I approached, the sea of faces parted slightly. Julian saw me first. His face, already flushed with anger, went a shade darker. "Olivia!" he roared, his voice hoarse. He strode towards me, waving the termination notice like a weapon. "What is the meaning of this? This is outrageous. It's illegal." I stopped a few feet from him. I met his furious gaze with a calm I didn't entirely feel, but projected nonetheless. "Actually, Julian," I said, my voice even measured, carrying just enough to be heard above the din, "it's entirely legal. And entirely necessary." I opened my briefcase and took out a bound document. Not as thick as the one Marcus had served him, but damning enough. "Clause 9, Section B of the lease agreement you signed," I stated, holding it up slightly. "It stipulates, and I quote, immediate termination of this lease shall be triggered by documented evidence of unethical corporate governance, including but not limited to appointments and dismissals driven by nepotism that demonstrably harm the brand's reputation or operational integrity." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I have that documented evidence, Julian. Years of it." Chloe pushed forward, her face pale, eyes wide with a dawning horror. You can't. This building. The Hearthstone," she stammered. "Oh, but I can, Chloe," I replied, turning to her. My voice softened just a fraction, but the steel remained. "Because Hearthstone Holdings LLC, the company my grandmother, Evelyn Hayes, founded, the company that bears her legacy, Hearthstone Holdings, owns this land. This building. You, Vance Hospitality Group, you were merely tenants. And your tenancy, as of 9 a.m. this morning, has been terminated." A collective gasp went through the assembled staff. Julian looked as if he'd been physically struck. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Chloe tried a different tactic. Tears welled in her eyes, real or crocodile, I couldn't tell, nor did I care. "Olivia, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We're family. You always said family is important." I looked directly into her eyes, and for a moment I felt a pang. Not of pity, but of sadness. Sadness for what could have been, for the bond that she herself had shattered. "Yes, Chloe," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Family is important. Terribly important. And that is precisely why I am doing this. I am protecting my family's legacy, the legacy Evelyn entrusted to me, from those who sought to undermine and devalue it for their own gain." I turned back to Julian, whose face had gone from red to a strange mottled white. "You have 24 hours, Julian. I said, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. 24 hours to remove all assets belonging to Vance Hospitality Group from these premises. Anything left behind after 9 a.m. tomorrow will be considered forfeit, property of Hearthstone Holdings. The fight seemed to drain out of him. He just stared at me, the papers trembling in his hand. The weight of the ground, Evelyn's ground, was finally, undeniably, pressing down on him. And it was a weight he couldn't shrug off. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the distant sound of city traffic. The reckoning was complete. 6 months. That's how long it's been since that morning. 6 months since the locks were changed for good, and the Vance Hospitality Group signs came down, replaced by the original, elegant Hearthstone Collective lettering that I had commissioned years ago. Rebuilding, it's been a journey. The Hearthstone Collective is open again, of course. But it's different now. Purer somehow. More aligned with Evelyn's original vision and with mine. We kept the best of what was, the solid foundations, the commitment to excellence. But we also swept away the dust, the compromises, the parts that had been tainted. The space itself feels lighter, brighter. We brought back many of the old team, the ones who had stayed loyal in their hearts, the ones who understood what the Hearthstone truly stood for. Their relief, their renewed passion, it's palpable. The energy in the kitchens, in the dining rooms, it's vibrant again. Full of genuine warmth, not just polished professionalism. Julian Vance? His star has definitely dimmed. The industry press had a field day with the story. Hearthstone reclaimed soul. One headline read, Vance Hospitality's stock took a hit, and I hear whispers of other unhappy partners, other brands feeling neglected. Eleanor sent a single terse email a few weeks after. No επάλεγη. Just a subject line. Regrets. I didn't reply. What was there to say? And Chloe? Last I heard, she was trying to launch some kind of lifestyle blog. Something about resilience, I think. I haven't looked. Honestly, I try not to think about them much anymore. Not with anger, anyway. That faded surprisingly quickly once the dust settled. What remains is a kind of quiet clarity. My office is simpler now. The big oak desk is still there. The Visionary of the Year plaque is gone, replaced by a larger, more cherished photograph of Evelyn. She's laughing in this one, her eyes crinkling at the corners, a mischievous spark in them. It's how I like to remember her. Her quiet strength, her unwavering belief in the power of the genuine. It guides me. Every day. You know, people talk about revenge, about getting even. But this wasn't about revenge for me. It was about restoration. About reclaiming something precious that was being eroded. It was about honoring a legacy. Evelyn always said, Olivia, they can try to build on your land, they can try to put their name on your door. But they can never ever take away the foundation if it truly deeply belongs to you. If you've built it with integrity, with love. And she was right. The Hearthstone, this time it's built on solid ground. My ground. Evelyn's ground. And it feels unshakable. This journey, it taught me a lot. It taught me that sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the space you need to cultivate strength from the roots up. Justice, well, it can be a slow vine, but it will eventually find the sun if you tend to it with patience, with truth, and with an unwavering commitment to your own integrity. The strongest foundations, I've learned, aren't made of brick and mortar. They're built from the values you refuse to compromise, the legacy you choose to protect. If you've ever felt overlooked or pushed aside after pouring your heart into something, or if you've faced betrayal from people you once trusted, I hope my story offers some small measure of understanding, maybe even comfort. If it resonated with you, please feel free to share your own experiences in the comments below. I do read every single one, and I believe there's strength in knowing we're not alone in these struggles. And if you found something meaningful here, perhaps consider subscribing to TK Revenge Story. We share these journeys, these quiet battles and hard-won clarities, because we believe every story told is a step towards healing. for the teller and the listener. If you'd like to support the channel in another way, the super thanks button is always there. Every gesture, no matter how small, helps us continue to bring these important stories to light. Because sometimes simply listening and sharing can be a powerful way to reclaim a piece of ourselves. Thank you for being here with me today.